Hello, everyone. Unless you've been under a rock lately, you've probably heard about Tumblr and the CEO, David Karp. Thanks, David, for being here with me today. You went from Charlie Rose to a pregnant ad woman on the Riviera, so a little bit different. So in case you aren't familiar with all the stats about Tumblr, I have some awesome stats. Started in 2007, there are now over 115 million blogs, over 50 billion posts, and people are spending 24 billion minutes on it every month. Relevant to this crowd, 50% of the creators on there are actually outside of the US, so that's great. More and more Tumblr is where trends begin. The rise of the GIF, blogs getting book deals, and some of my favorite memes that you all probably know, like reasons for my son crying, one of my faves. It's a network focused on creators and a place where they can make and show their best work and really cultivate an audience. So your first time here at Cannes, Festival of Creativity, even sponsoring the Gutter Bar, which a little tip.
Which seems to be the spot.
Yeah, if you're there late, watch out for the street cleaner. It will get you. It's appropriate, though, you're here because really creativity is at the core of why you created Tumblr, right? I mean, for yourself initially. Will you tell everyone a little bit about how you created it?
Sure, yeah, look, I mean, it started very selfishly as something I wanted to use that I thought was missing. I started noodling on what would become Tumblr. Started as just my own little blog that I was trying to build. And this was back in 2004, 2005, when the technology had come unbelievably far. All of a sudden, you could upload videos to the internet and share them really easily. I mean, that was unbelievably hard just a couple years earlier. Pretty much anything you wanted to put up there, high-res, as many high-res photos as you wanted to host on Flickr. I mean, there was a tremendous amount of technical capability. And yet this trend that the products and the networks that actually been following at that point or tracking was, we started with this wide open, really pretty chaotic internet. The GeoCities, the MySpaces, that many would say were kind of ugly. I would say, for their time, were actually kind of beautiful and incredibly expressive. And as we started to kind of refine the interfaces, as we started to polish them up, they actually became more and more limited. So even though the tech was becoming incredibly capable, even though the technology was incredibly capable at this point, the tools were forcing you to stick your videos over here on YouTube, your photos over here on Flickr, your 140 characters on Twitter, and your essays over on WordPress. And this sort of bifurcation of all of these different modes of expression was really frustrating to me, particularly coming out of an area of learning how to build websites and being able to hack together a GeoCities page that looked any number of different ways, or get something onto the internet that was true and yours and something that you were really proud of. So I wanted so badly to have something out there that was mine. Way before I had Tumblr.com, I had davidslog.com. So I'd been just trying to pull my little website together that I could put out into the world that would represent me. And all the tools to get that stuff out there were really, really limited. I could put my photos over in Flickr's directory. I could have a vanilla white profile page on Facebook. I could have my videos over on YouTube, and I wanted to do all of it in one place that was mine and was presented the way that I wanted to present it. So that was the beginning of Tumblr. Was just, again, very selfishly something that I wanted to create for myself that I would be proud of. And the issue then, and still largely the issue today, is that it's hard to create something on any of these very specialized focused networks that you're really truly proud of, that really represents everything that you care about.
Yeah. So you did it for creators, essentially.
Well, me being the first one. So me being an aspiring creator who didn't want to just be forced to write articles, didn't want to be forced to only post my photos or only post my videos. I wanted to do all of it and create something that was mine out there in the world.
And what, if it is everything and it is this flexible, open platform, what is it that you really think defines what Tumblr is then? Is it, the way that tools are easy and they're built in?
Well, look, so the way it evolved, so along the way, so at this point, I'm a few months into hacking together the first version of my blog. Only taking so long because I was just constantly iterating, constantly thinking about new ways to do it. At some point, I found a formula that I was really excited about, this one stream that had all of this mixed media that were in these nice little containers. So you could post a short idea without having to come up with a witty blog title for it. You could post just a photo. It didn't even need paragraphs of text around it. It didn't need an editorial voice, which which is very different than the blogosphere that had started to develop back in 2005, 2006. So these were just tools that I wanted for myself. And at some point, it clicked that there are probably some other people out there in the world who have the same frustrations that I do, and might actually kind of get a kick out of using the same tool. So then I started to think about it as a product. Started to think about how to let people sign up, how I would describe it, and what the interface would look like. How I would polish up the interface to make it usable, suitable for other people. And look, out of that, a handful of really awesome creators showed up. Just a few people that set a really great example, started doing something really cool with it. From there, an audience started to show up to see the stuff that those creators were doing. Once that audience started to emerge, more and more creators saw an opportunity to do something cool here, to make something that they were proud of and find their own following, find their own audience. And that grew and grew and grew to today an audience of about 300 million people all over the world. So an audience emerged out of this core community of creators that was inspired to use these tools that we were giving them to make something that they were proud of.
You talk about creators, and I think in other platforms, there's individuals that are on the platform, and then there are brands and different. There's a different, like a line in the sand. Those are not treated the same. I think on Tumblr it's a little bit different, where everyone's sort of on the same playing field. Will you talk a little bit about creators and your vision of what brands are as creators?
Sure. Well, I mean, part of that is that the normal user profiles is not really a part of the formula, right? The people who set up on Tumblr are creators. They're there to make something. And it might be a very small idea. It might not be a career that they're trying to build. It might be. I mean, it might be their band or their book, their art, whatever they're trying to launch. But generally, you're not setting up shop on Tumblr unless you're trying to tell a story. So in that regard, there is a very kind of clear design of the network. There are people who are trying to tell stories, and there are the people who show up to see those stories. One is on the order of tens of millions, one is on the order of hundreds of millions. And for that reason, it was always kind of natural for us to just sort of extend the tools. And by the way, extending the tools really wasn't doing much. All we really did was say, brands, advertisers, big organizations that want to tell big stories on Tumblr and make customers and show the world your values. You can do that on Tumblr with all of the same tools that these tens of millions of creators are using today to tell their stories.
Yeah. And you mentioned audience, finding an audience, and obviously that's something that brands and creative people are trying to do, is to get the brands out there for people. But I think we're also talking a lot about not just numbers, but quality, like more of an engagement, participation in terms of that audience. So how is that on Tumblr? How is it maybe different, the audience on Tumblr, from other platforms?
I don't know that it's a different audience. I mean, it's the same.
Is it a different sort of engagement?
It's definitely people on the same planet who tend to be excited about a lot of the same sorts of things. The behavior is dramatically different, and the context is very different.
Yeah.
And you're not coming to Tumblr for anything social. So many of these networks, you show up either for utility or some sort of productivity. You show up on Google because you want to get somewhere, you want to do something, you want to find something. You show up on Facebook or Twitter today because the people that you care about are there. You show up on Instagram because the people that you care about are there. Tumblr is not defined, or your experience on Tumblr is not defined by the people that you know. It's about the stuff that you love. It's about the creators that are making things that you show up, that you enjoy, that you listen to, that you read, that you watch. So it's again, same people. Same human beings out there, but they show up on Tumblr for very different reasons. They're showing up to avoid checking their email, to tune out from the real world for a moment, to be inspired, to see something that surprises them, to see something that they love.
So it's less socializing with like the friends and people they know, and more like discovery, right?
Very much. And by the way, discovery not always in the sort of haphazard, like bouncing around the network sort of sense of discovery. Kind of clicking through one related video to another, but instead, subscribing to creators who are making stuff. So in the same way that you subscribe to your, whatever it is, Daily Show, Colbert, Game of Thrones, your favorite magazines, your favorite director, and you are a lifelong fan and constantly enjoy every new thing that they put out. That's the type of, I think, fair to call discovery, but it's that type of behavior where you're subscribing to the things that you care about, and you're being constantly surprised by the new things that they're inventing, the new things that they're putting in front of you.
Well, it's interesting because that could be good for brands then too, because if they are about getting their story out there and their content versus interrupting some like friendship that's happening on it, like that makes it a different sort of place for them to be.
Look,
right?
I mean, that's why I'm so excited about this industry, the people in this room today, the people here hanging out this week. You guys are some of the most talented creators in the world. And traditionally, when people are in that mode of sitting down to enjoy something, they're not trying to have a conversation with their friends. They're not there for some utility where you're getting in their way by putting an ad in between them and whatever they're trying to get to. When they sit down in front of their television, when they sit down in a theater or pull out the latest copy of Vogue, those ads in Vogue, I mean, for one, if you pull the ads out of Vogue, it would be a much lighter magazine. But
especially the fall fashion issue.
Those ads make that magazine a lot better.
Yeah.
Those ads are a big part of the experience and actually some really terrific content. When people are in that mode of wanting to see stuff that they enjoy, and you can put a story in front of them, you can put content in front of them that they do enjoy, that works. We've seen it works. We've seen it build some of the biggest brands in the world, and that's what this industry celebrates. I mean, that's why I think many of you guys gotten into this industry. You have Mad Men aspirations. You want to do great creative. You want to create ads that get you out to France to win awards. And that's something you've been able to do in traditional media forever, and something we've celebrated forever. Interestingly, so much of the internet today hasn't really celebrated that. They've been kind of squeezing you guys down into little blue links that get hyper-optimized and try and get people to convert or to harvest intent. And that's something that seemed really unnatural for Tumblr, something we didn't want to see on Tumblr. And so instead, we've really pushed for folks like you, some of the most creative people in the industry, to show up on Tumblr, make great creative ads, and content that actually makes more better stuff on Tumblr, makes Tumblr a more fun, compelling experience with more great stuff to enjoy, in the same way that those ads in Vogue make it a denser, funner magazine for people that enjoy that content.
And would you say that's more like media? Is that more of like a media network then than social?
I think absolutely, and I think that's a very important distinction. I think an awful lot of stuff on the internet today gets lumped into social. I think it's very important to appreciate that there are very different contexts. There's nothing social about the common use case of YouTube. There's nothing social about the common use case of Tumblr today.
Yeah. Just in terms of brands, being on Tumblr and obviously wanting to be part of the community and be authentic. Where I work at Co, we're always talking about brands and how to get them and their authentic story out there. How important is that to being on Tumblr, to being part of a community versus just broadcasting, and selling messages out there?
My whole thing, this is the same thesis I have in just sort of product development, something that we talk about all the time at Tumblr. If you're not being authentic, I just don't think your output is going to be very good. I mean, unless you're actually excited about the stuff that you're doing, unless you really believe in the stuff that you're doing, I think it's going to be hard to produce anything you're really proud of, and hard to produce anything that anybody else gives a shit about. So, I don't think it's important to be authentic in the sense that it's important to be authentic. I think it's important to be authentic in that you need to work on stuff that you really believe in, that you really think is great, that you're excited to see exist. And if you're doing that, if you're putting something out there in the world that you're really proud of, you're most cases are going to find an audience for it. And that's something that we've seen over and over again, even very small ideas that connect with an audience in a really meaningful way, just because the person behind it really believed in that thing they were doing.
I have a couple of friends that have a lot of Tumblrs. The creative people love the Tumblrs, and one of them has 19 of them. And he does it some for like quirky things, some he aggregates stuff that he loves, some he showcases his work. So really uses Tumblrs for like a bunch of different purposes. Do you see brands doing that versus, they're used to checking the box, having their Facebook page, having their Twitter account? Like, how is it different on Tumblr in terms of expressing yourself as a brand to be really multidimensional?
Sure. Yeah, I think there's kind of this. Well, let's see. So, I was going to compare it to the other networks. Let me just start with Tumblr real quick to say, some of what we've seen that has gotten us really excited is, you don't need to set up on Tumblr and make this your brand's presence. You don't need to approach it as a CRM where you're constantly kind of communicating with and interacting with your customers in real time. Tumblr is about telling stories that inspire people to become your customers. And you can approach that in a I think, a way that's familiar to a lot of the folks here, which is a very campaign-driven way, where this thing that you create on Tumblr doesn't need to be yourbrand.tumblr.com. It can be, in some cases, a completely invented character, story, idea that opens up part of your story, part of your value, something that you believe in a way that makes it accessible to people that didn't necessarily know that they care about your brand. There are a bunch of examples of this. One of my favorites was out of Lionsgate. They did last year for the Hunger Games. Maybe
it's probably up here, maybe.
Yeah, you'll probably see it at some point, and it's not going to say Hunger Games. It's actually Capital Couture. So rather than showing up on Tumblr and doing what they were doing on every other network, which is youtube.com/Hunger Games, Facebook/Hunger Games, they showed up on Tumblr. Didn't register Hunger Games. They didn't just start posting pre-order tickets for 25% off. They didn't just start posting movie trailers. What did they do? They invented a fashion magazine, called it Capital Couture. Lives on capitalcouture.pn, which points to their blog on Tumblr. Beautiful, beautiful original content, and an exploration of the fashion of the world of the Hunger Games. So what this did was took all of the biggest Hunger Games fans, people who had read all 3 books, some cases multiple times, and for the first time, they could see them. It brought the world to life. It gave them this whole new dimension of the world, of this world that they loved, to explore. They had read about the fashion, they'd imagined it. Now they could see it come to life in front of them, and it was beautiful. So what did this do? For the biggest fans, they were thrilled. They were hooked. They were subscribed and following every new thing that these guys put out, and they were even contributing to it. The really cool thing that this did is it made the world of the Hunger Games accessible to people that had no idea that they cared or that they should care. And what happened was our fashion community, we have a really strong fashion community on Tumblr today, they were sucked in, they were drawn in by this incredible, whimsical fashion content that they'd never seen before, this entirely new aesthetic from this alien world invented in these books that suddenly got them to care about the world of the Hunger Games. So this is a type of thing that we've seen now happen by opening up, again, some dimension of your world, some dimension of your beliefs.
Going deeper, like where you wouldn't be able to tell
Going deeper into a character, into an idea, into a storyline, whatever it is.
Now, how would that work, though? Let's say, you can make that clear connection to a movie. They're creating content already, or a magazine that knows how to write stories. How would you do that for a regular brand, like a food brand or something else? Like, what is an example?
Whole Foods is doing this really brilliantly now too, with not going into their stores, but going into the ethical sourcing of their food, going to the preparation of their food, and what you can do with their food. That's kind of an easy one. I'll give you, I think, a really fun one, which is Lincoln Motors. So, car brand, and I would just say generally, the state of automotive advertising is sort of
get those beauty
predictable.
shots.
Those beautiful shots of the black sedan zipping down some generic city street with the lights blazing behind them and the whole thing.
Some people did those in here, so you have to be careful.
They're beautiful. I think you can take it a bit further. And then the big 0% APR, or whatever it is, the banner that flashes at the end, right? So we're kind of used to seeing car ads that sort of show off whatever the features of the latest brand car are. What did Lincoln do when they showed up on Tumblr? The first thing they did that was incredibly thoughtful was they spent some time just experimenting with the tools. So just privately, before they put anything out there into the world, they signed up for some accounts. They started to see what kind of car content they could make, what sort of content they could create that was in keeping with their brand that they actually thought people would care about. They did that for a while, and then as they started to get a feel for it, they started to look around the network, and they started to look at a few things. One, just the type of content that was performing well, the things that people were getting excited about. The other thing they started to look for were genres of content that they thought were in keeping with their brand. And what they found was, so many of the little corners of our network have brands as fixtures of them. So in our fashion community, as an example, you'll see Dior in there, you'll see American Apparel in there, as real fixtures of that community, where those guys, for those people who are posting their outfits every day, who are posting things that they're designing, who are curating the fashion that they love, those brands are kind of a positive and validating force for them that occasionally show up and will like or reblog one of their outfits, something that they created, and make them are sort of a stamp of, look, this big world-known brand that has stores all over the world just came and said, yeah, that thing you did is really, really good. So we're used to having these sort of fixtures in these different communities. What Lincoln saw was there was this big kind of vintage aesthetic on Tumblr, this community that just adored this.
So they went
old,
straight after
stuff.
like a community.
They saw that, yeah. So they saw this community, and they said, that is so in keeping with our heritage. Mm-hmm. And what did they do? They dove into that community. They really sought to understand it, to understand what type of content they loved, what they were doing that, or what they loved that they weren't getting enough of, what they had in their history that they could bring to the table, what their, what archives and content they were sitting on that they could show up with and surprise people with. That's exactly what they did.
Yeah, it's interesting because normally, you have to sort of be broad and cover the bases, and this lets you go deeper into like a specific piece of a brand that you might not normally get to talk about.
And look, it might not reach as many people. That one so as an example, one of the first ads that they ran, which was gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. First of all, it was something called a cinemagraph, which if you haven't found these yet, absolutely go and Google them. This was an invention by a really brilliant photographer on Tumblr named Jamie Beck, who has basically invented something you've probably seen at this point. Yeah. I mean, it has effectively invented the moving image. I mean, they look like something out of the Harry Potter newspapers. It's like a still photo, but kind of like gently animated. Really beautiful. So
probably really simple, like a GIF, basically, right?
Very simple. It's a GIF, but you would never know it. It's subtle. Anyway, really, really capturing images. That was the first thing that Lincoln created on Tumblr. It wasn't one of their new shiny cars, like blazing down a road with the little 0% financing down at the bottom. It was the young, sort of hippie-looking girl sitting on a big, old, boxy, purple Lincoln in a flowery meadow. It was like the most trippy, beautiful, lovely thing that the community went absolutely bananas for because it was spectacular, and the people who loved that aesthetic were drawn in. They had no idea
that they should give a shit about
Lincoln. Yes, yeah. They had no idea they should give a shit, but these guys did such a great job of creating something that was so compelling that brought across their heritage and their brand in such a thoughtful, beautiful way that people were drawn in.
Who, in something like that, who do you usually work with? Do you work with the brands directly, or do you work with the agencies, or a mixture? How does that work normally and stuff on Tumblr?
Well, look, the creative agencies are really our heroes in all of this. I mean, they were the first people that we started these conversations with, mostly because, look, I shouldn't say are our heroes. Everybody in this industry who is excited about great creative, making real great creative ads, and showing up here to celebrate the most creative ads in the world, you are our heroes. Our sense was that those most creative agencies have really gotten the short end of the stick on the web. Again, they're the guys who've been squeezed into a corner of making little adjacent blue links that get A, B, C, D, and E tested to find the one that is 0.2% optimized. It's fine. I mean, it's I think important, but it's not the type of advertising, in my mind, that will build the next $100 billion brand, right? You need to tell stories, you need to reach many, many people and capture them, inspire them to become customers. And that's something that this industry and the creative agencies have always been so brilliant at and aspire to do. And right now they're still most excited about the traditional media stuff because that's the stuff that gives them room to do it.
Well, it's interesting because I think it's a different way of advertising. It's a different sort of expression, and it can be a little scary because I think most brands and agencies are used to dealing with this. There's a certain campaign, it gets done at a certain amount of time, it needs to have certain results. This isn't something that you just sort of produce and you leave out there. I mean, they are since becoming publishers. I mean, that's becoming part of their product in a way to publish their story and ongoing. You can't put a Tumblr up and just let it sit and then it's done. So how much work is that, or how have people handled that and done a really good job at it?
That's a really good question. So this is, just to be clear, this was not a brilliant design decision on our part. This is kind of a happy accident. But the way we've seen, one of the ways we've seen a lot of brands be very successful on Tumblr, something I'm very happy to tell you guys is you don't need to sweat it that much. You can keep it small, you can keep it very focused, and do something that looks more like a campaign. It doesn't need to be a constant presence. It doesn't need to be always on. You don't need to be monitoring it.
Have 100 people working on it.
You can stick one young aspiring creative on it on your team to just come up with something that is really smart, really cool, really beautiful, and will capture people. And it can be any number. Again, it can be insightful, it can be beautiful. It can just give a new point of view. It can give people access to something that they wouldn't normally be able to see. I think GE is doing a really spectacular job of that right now. Just showing. Again, showing the world great creative, telling great stories that draw people in. And you can do that in a small way. You can do that in a campaign-oriented way. So Old Spice's Mr. Wolf Dog campaign, MrWolfDog.com, that was heavily advertised for a period, drawing a huge amount of traffic to one presence. You got to know this character and fall in love with this character and spend some amount of time with this character. The point wasn't to create a new mascot that lived on and had a Twitter presence that was like, chatting with everybody forever. It was to create something that showed you this brand and their sensibilities in a way that got you to care when you might not have before.
Yeah.
And that can be focused. That can exist for a moment in time.
Another thing, in terms of brands is they can be scared sometimes to be so open. You talk about being an authentic part of the community, which means reblogging and engaging with those people, and sometimes being more closed off is the safer way to go, right? So I noticed on Tumblr, it's a little bit of a different thing. You can either heart something or you have to reblog it, but then it's on your blog, and it really makes you aware of what you're doing. How did you design it with that in mind, or why did you?
So yeah, it started with a very different interest, which was, we knew that we would be a home for creators, or we were trying to build a home for creators. And part of being a home for creators is you really want it to be a positive environment. You don't want people being scared off by jerks. And one of the really unfortunate things, and by the way, real credit to Google and the team over there. They put a lot of measures in place to make this better. It's very hard when you have comments underneath every video on YouTube to keep jerks out. And it really sucks when you pour your heart into something to be called fat or to be called any number of horrible things by just jerks on the internet. It's really an uncomfortable, gross thing. And the last thing that you want some young aspiring creator to be hit with when they're trying to find their voice. They were nervous about posting that thing. So we put, I'd like to believe, a lot of care. At the very least, we took a lot of time. It's thought very hard about every sort of interactive feature on Tumblr, because it started with none. It was purely publishing. It was one way. You put the thing out there and the audience can read it. And over time, we added the ability to like and reblog. We added the ability to ask and answer questions. We added the ability to reblog and add a commentary. We added submissions. But all of these things, you'll notice, really don't allow for drive-by nastiness. So I can reblog your post, which means I spread it further.
Yeah.
But when I have anything to say about your post, I'm saying it on my page. So I'm reblogging you, and I have to put your post up there. So already I'm kind of doing you a service by actually showing the world what you said. And then anything I say, it's not like a little thing that a little bit of nastiness I leave on your page. If I'm being a jerk, I'm just making myself look like a jerk, and your page stays pristine. If I want to interact with you, can ask you a question. It's a little hard to be a jerk when it ends in a question mark. If you just think about it, you can be a little bit passive aggressive, but it sort of forces you to be a little bit open-minded. What do you have to say about this?
Conversation.
We don't have messaging on Tumblr. We have fan mail. And not just the name, but the design of fan mail is you actually have to pick a postcard. You have to pick a cardstock. You have to pick a font, pen color to send this message. It takes about 45 seconds minimum to send a message on Tumblr. So even to send that little bit of hate takes about 30, 45 seconds. When you receive it, it looks beautiful. So you just know that you get this beautifully designed little card. This person spent a minute typing up this dumb little hateful thing. By the time you get it, you're just this is just so absurd that it really diminishes any negativity that gets passed around. So we've taken a lot of care in making Tumblr just a positive environment. The nice thing is that really, I hope, and what I really believe we've started to see is, it gives brands a very easy onboarding. Again, they don't
designing for little creative, sensitive types actually has worked well for brands.
Very much. So actually, I'll mention a few things. So one is it's that there isn't a lot of community wrangling you have to do. Another thing is, the expectation on Tumblr is not necessary. A lot of these networks, expectation on Twitter is that you're going to engage in a conversation, which is a very, there are a lot of considerations that go along with that. Expectation on Pinterest is that you're going to be curating other intellectual property. Those both come with real implications. Luckily on Tumblr, you can show up with your own creative and kind of skirt all of those issues. You need to come up with something creative that people care about, but there aren't the same sort of, I don't know, liabilities or considerations attached to it, which makes for a sort of easy onboard. Other thing is we don't share stats. So your follower counts, your performance isn't published out there in the world. So you can make little bets and try something kind of small and experimental and not feel any sense of shame that you only have 2,000 followers, that sort of thing, which I always thought was pretty gross on other networks. So hopefully a lot about the design of Tumblr makes it a welcoming place for whether it's a young aspiring kid putting their photography out there in the world for the first time, or Lions winners doing their next award-winning campaign. Hopefully it's an accommodating, welcoming place for creators.
And what about, since it seems like a potentially more brand safe sort of place, what do you tell brands that question you about the porn?
Look, it's actually a great story. We have much less than most of the other networks. Tumblr is very big, and you'll find that stuff there if you go looking for it. But as a percentage of the network, we're actually doing better than pretty much any other network you name. So look, the big developments we've made there in the last about year and a half, the last couple years, we've invested a lot in real flagging, which was something we didn't have before. So people can check a box and say, I'm for a mature audience, I'm actually porn. They can check that box. Our moderators check that box. We have algorithms that check that box. And we use that to keep you away from that unless you actually go looking for it. And we do a much better job of that now where, if you're a 14-year-old kid using Tumblr, you're not going to just bump into that by accident.
Yeah.
That's the really yucky thing is when you just, you're looking at, cute bears because they're your favorite animal, and all of a sudden you run into some gay porn. That's a slightly
that happens
jarring
sometimes.
moment for some of us.
Yeah, that's a good segue. So in terms of I know we've been looking, now we're looking at us, but we've been looking at some of the work back there. And I think this is an audience full of all different people. So we've got creatives, we have CMOs, we have producers, and they're all here. They're winning awards, doing great work. You mentioned a couple of the other projects. What are some of the things that have either wowed you that you didn't expect to come out of Tumblr? Or what are some things that you wish you saw? How can you inspire this group of people to do things? What can they add to it?
So I won't name any specific examples right now. You've seen plenty, and I've mentioned plenty. I would just say, one of the things that frustrates me about the role that I'll say, my community of engineers plays in the creative world right now, is that, for some reason, you guys think that we know anything, and that we haven't just, stumbled onto formulas that are working, and that we have a vision for tools that can let you guys do something good, let you guys create something that we're excited about. There's a lot of, I worry, and look, I might have completely mischaracterized this, but I worry that there's a lot of following going on in this industry right now, that there's a lot of, by the way, not just this, across all creation, all arts and media today, that folks are looking for some engineer to tell them to make it square or make it 6 seconds. You guys are much more talented than any of the folks at the Tumblr office, anybody in Sunnyvale or Palo Alto or Mountain View. You guys have the history of making stuff that really moves us, that inspires us, makes us aspire to a lifestyle. I mean, you guys make extraordinary stuff. And we are, at Tumblr, just constantly in awe and constantly in service of this community of creators that surprises us every single day. And our role in this, our mission, is just to give them the tools, just to empower them to make something even better. And this is something that technology has been doing for a long time. I mean, you think, before the world of Avid and Final Cut and Maya and all these things, Pixar couldn't have existed. A whole lot of the art and media that we enjoy today couldn't have existed if it weren't for technology. But we celebrate that art. And for some reason, we've started to now skew towards people who can just sort of, follow the latest trend, the latest tool. I don't like the idea that we're the ones inventing the meme. I want to give you guys the biggest canvas that we can and have you invent the next meme. And if it turns into something that, the cinemagraphs, like I mentioned before, which I think are going to exist for a long time because they're a whole beautiful new form of photography. Some of them might blow up for a moment and then have a half-life, die off over time. But you guys are going to invent it. I don't think it's going to be engineers that invent the most compelling new art and media, invent the most compelling new memes.
It's interesting because I've worked on other platforms, and sometimes there is you're in the middle of making something, you sell it to a client, and then the platform changes in the middle of it, and they say, actually, you can't make that on here anymore, and you have to change it. And there's kind of this lack of respect for what we do in advertising in general.
I hate the rules. I hate how many rules you guys get hit with on all of these networks.
So do you work closely with the agencies and stuff sometimes to even change things, or do you just say we're just open to
what we're constantly listening to is what are the walls that you're running into? We try and keep Tumblr. We try and keep Tumblr ahead of the curve. Occasionally we slip on some front, but excuse me. Our goal, our hope with this platform is to keep it ahead of the curve, keep it supporting every new generation of technology. When the new iPhones made it really, really easy to create these beautiful panoramas, and all of a sudden we realized at Tumblr that we were creating these really beautiful panoramic photos that we were really proud of. Well, then we realized they look like shit on Facebook, they look like shit on Tumblr, they look like shit, they look especially silly on Instagram, where it's a tiny little line going across a big black square. We realized that was really pretty lame, and we need to be able to support these things. They're awesome, and they're some of the coolest photos that we were seeing. So we added really good panorama support. We added photo set support. We support bigger and bigger animations. We support pretty much any other network under the sun. We try and leave this thing wide open. So any new creative tool, the latest one that I'm obsessed with is this one called Stilly, which lets you create these cool little gently animated images that look sort of 3D. My last favorite one was Manga Camera, which I very much encourage everybody to download. It's like $2 or something by this team in Japan. It's spectacular. It's something you could never make it would be incredibly tedious to make in Photoshop. They actually created an algorithm where I take a photo of you up here and it spits out a manga comic cell that looks like really, really good. So we want to support every new tool under the sun. We want to support anything that you guys can imagine. And I don't know. I hate the idea that you guys are following whatever the latest sort of tech trend is at the moment. We're here to enable you guys to show us the way.
It is about creating then on Tumblr, and there aren't going to be, I know with the Yahoo buy and everything, there's things that people might question that are changing. Is there going to be advertising on it, or will it always be about native advertising, really?
There's a lot of advertising on it today, and it's working.
But it's not like
ads. Some of it's working really well. But
yeah.
Look, they're ads. In the same way that 30-second spot is an ad, in the same way that Vogue page or that Vogue centerfold can be an ad. But again, it feels good. It can feel really, really good when it's a great ad. And look, I have so much faith in the folks in this room to make great ads, and we're excited to see you guys do a lot of it here.
So then, if you're here, which I'm assuming maybe next year we can hang out again. You'll have maybe a villa that we can all come to.
Everyone is invited.
What would you want from this room? Like, if everyone has actually taken to heart, what you're saying and got inspired, like, how would Tumblr change next year when you're talking about it? What kind of things would you
You guys would be making me the happiest kid in the world if next year.
And you are a kid, kind of.
Still, although hanging out with Nick this week really, man, puts things in perspective. Nick from Sumley, now my counterpart, I guess, who is, by the way, a lot sharper than I was when I was 17. Very jealous. Anyway, feel
so you feel old now, finally.
Well,
thanks. I feel really old.
Entrepreneurial 17-year-olds. I used to be that. I was the youngest kid in the room once. Anyway, look, you guys would make me so happy. You would make everybody at Tumblr so happy. You'd make our community so happy if next year you guys were bringing home a whole bunch of awards for stuff you were creating on Tumblr. I really think you can do it. There's so much room here to do so much of what the web, what the hardware, what the software is capable of today. Push it all the way. Don't limit yourselves.
So some advice besides maybe learning how to build and sell a company for $1 billion, what would be the key takeaways that everyone should leave with in terms of what they learned and what they need to go have as marching orders to do something great?
For creators to do something great on Tumblr?
Yeah, like what do you want people to take away?
The stuff that we've seen perform the best is the stuff that surprises us, surprises everybody on Tumblr. Again, one of the most fulfilling things about this job is, we're working on the tools And it's really fun to think about, like, before the thing existed, before the hammer or the color existed, like, to actually imagine that thing and try and figure out how to get it to work. And you can kind of think through some of the ways that that thing will be used, but you really can't cover it. You have like some dim idea, and you can't possibly imagine all the ways it actually gets applied. So that's what we're thinking about all the time at Tumblr. Is like, what's the next color we can give you guys to paint with? What are the new words that we can give you guys to write with? And we ship it at some point. We're working on it. We're trying to get it as polished and as powerful as possible. We think about, while we're working on it, we're imagining the ways that it can be used. We're testing it out a little bit. But then we put it out there into the world, and literally minutes later, the next day, we come back and we are surprised thousands of times over by what folks like you are able to do with it. It's awesome. I mean, it's a real privilege to get to serve a community that's so much more talented than we are, and is responsible for so much of the stuff that we enjoy. And I'm excited to see a lot more of it.
Cool. Well, any parting words?
Really, guys, we are so humbled to be here, and so privileged to get to work with the folks here that we are working with. We're so honored to see the folks here who have already picked up the tools, are already starting to find their way around Tumblr and the tools, and the folks here who are even excited about Tumblr. It really means a ton, and please let us know any ways that we can help.
They're going to call you. Can you give your email address out right now?
I'm just david@tumblr.com. I don't always read it. But the team in New York is so excited to talk, so excited to work with you, so excited to see what you're able to do. I am too, the community is too, and please, at the very least, take a moment to look around. We've thrown some stuff up here today. Take a moment to look around Tumblr and just see some of the things that people are doing there, because it's awesome.
What's the best way
and
for
it's
them
different.
to do that?
And by the way, tumblr.com. You'll get there. I would actually say, consider picking it up on the app for the first time if you haven't yet. The mobile apps have gotten so good. We have 4.5-star apps on all platforms, Android, iOS, and Windows Mobile. It's good, and the media works incredibly well.
Does this exist somewhere that we're looking at for them to?
Brands.tumblr.com.
Yeah.
You'll see that in our spots and our ads all over Con this week. Brands.tumblr.com. You'll get to links to a bunch of these great brands on Tumblr. Good examples. And again, just look at the things that people are doing here, because I think, I hope what you'll see, certainly what I see, is people doing stuff that doesn't look like anything else anywhere else on the internet. That's pretty cool to me. The idea that people are showing up, seeing a blank canvas, and trying to do something that really stands apart. Something I'd love to see you guys doing more of. Yeah.
Well, awesome. It was great having you here, and you're doing amazing things for creators, so everyone's appreciative of that. And I guess it's time to drink some rosé now, and obviously you're going to buy.
Come hang out, everybody. Gutter Bar.
Are you going to be there?
Yeah, I'm around. I'm usually across the street under the palm tree, sort of waving at my friends. The mosh pit is a little bit too much for me, but I will be there.
You'll get used to it. You have
Guys,
to just push.
Please come hang out. Really, thank you.
Cool. Thanks, David.
Tiffany, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. So much fun. Thank you.